Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. And if you'd like to call us, we've got a number for you, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line, 712-770-9418. And I'm delighted to be broadcasting with my dear friend, Rich Scheben. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Mr. Finelli. It's a beautiful day here in northwest Montana. Sunny. We're supposed to be in the 60s today, 70s tomorrow. It's just gorgeous. How's everything down by your neck of the woods?
Well, since you mentioned cars, this I have never seen this in my entire life. Never. And I doubt many of you have as well. Now, there are promotions from time to time, but gasoline in Springfield, Missouri, 99 cents a gallon. But that's not what I've never seen in my, but here's what I've never seen. Now, I've seen that before, but I have not seen this. In 1992, when William Clinton was president, gasoline hit 99 cents a gallon. That was the last time before this time. But that's still not the thing that I've never seen before. Here it is. So when I was pumping gas back in the 70s, premium, sometimes it was called ethyl, sometimes it was called high test, sometimes, well, now it's called premium. When I was growing up in the 1950s and the 1960s, it was called ethyl, sometimes it was called extra, and sometimes it was called high test. So that was the more expensive stuff. So now we call it premium. Premium was always about 20 to 25% more expensive than the regular grade of gasoline. I saw regular gasoline and premium selling for the same price, 96.9 cents a gallon. Yesterday. 96.9 cents. You can check it out right on gasbuddy.com in Springfield, New Missouri. At Sam's Club, 96.9 cents a gallon. Can you imagine that? Rich, have you ever seen premium selling for the same price as regular?
No, I never had, but I'm looking at Market Watch right now since you brought it up. Right now, crude's going for $13.24, and Brent actually, I'm surprised, it's $23.66. Last time I looked at Brent a few days ago, it was actually in the teens, which is incredible. You know, they gotta sell it. You know, they gotta push it, and you know, we have so few storage units left to house oil, and you know, I think it's great for the little guy that oil is cheap, even though it does take a lot of jobs out of the industry. However, if you can't use it and go anywhere with it, it almost doesn't matter. And until America, and in our case, Canada, starts opening up their doors. I mean, right now the Canadian dollar is 40 cents or 40%, the loonie to our dollar, in our favor. So I think that, I don't know how Canada is going to survive. I'm reading, you know, that Western Canada, their meat and potatoes is gas and oil. And with the quotes I just gave you, you know where that's going. And real estate is their number 2 industry, and it's about ready to go south. I was in Florida about a month and a half ago, and I was coming back and sat next to a Canadian gal because I had to fly into Calgary because I had a better deal. Long story short, going through a divorce. He bought a house 3 years ago for $300,000. He sold it for half in the area of Calgary. So, boy, if things don't open up for U.S. and especially Canada, I see some very bad things happening, Vince.
Well, I believe that, and I've said this, that we are in the second Great Depression, and this one will be worse. And, depression is considered a severe long-term contraction in economic activity. Depression lasts for years. It's more extreme in length and depth than a recession. And according to what I've read and learned and studied over the years, the United States has had one Great Depression. Well, and they say it lasted 10 years, but that's not true. The Depression did not last 10 years. It lasted from 1929 through 1945, the end of the Second World War. The Second World War was the event, or the series of events that pulled us out of the First Great Depression. But if you look at what happened in the First Depression, there was a massive amount of unemployment. And I remember asking my dad many, many times over my life, what did things cost? And it was always the same answer. And I've said this before on the air. It didn't matter what they cost. Nobody had any money. And what are we looking at right now? We're looking at the government just handing out $1,200 per person, allegedly. I mean, I haven't seen it, but I've heard that they're handing out $1,200 per person just to keep them afloat, just to pay their mortgage notes, just to attempt to pay part of their mortgage notes. I mean, how many people have a mortgage note of $1,200? Very few. It's way more than that. People have car payments that are half of that, right? $500, $600, $700 for car payments. So that $1,200 is not going to go very far. Landlords have no idea what to do because their tenants have begun not paying rent. And that's just the beginning. So the credit card companies are reducing credit card limits because they know for a fact that people who don't have jobs can't pay the credit card bills. They know that. So they have begun reducing credit card limits so their customers don't spend as much and leave the credit card banks on the hook for all that credit that they've issued. So it looks to me that people who have been living paycheck to paycheck are not going to do very well in this. Those are all examples of a depression. Unemployment. If you're a young person and you're working at a restaurant or retail, and retail is closed and restaurants are closed, exactly how are you going to pay your bills? So we're in gridlock right now. And the proof of this is oil. Americans are addicted to gasoline and fuel oil, addicted to it. And here we have a glut of it, and we don't know what to do with it. There's so much of it. So it's all clear to me that just from looking at those few examples that I've pointed out, that we are in, for sure, in my mind, in my opinion, the second Great Depression. But most people would disagree. Most people would say, no, it's just a recession. How can it be a recession when most of the country is out of work? How is that possible? How is it possible that people are in a panic, literally in a panic? They have lockdown panic. They can't stand it. About a quarter of the people today who've been surveyed say that they're on the edge of losing it or will lose it within about a month or so because of the lockdown. They can't stand it. They can't take it anymore. They can't take looking at four walls. Imagine what prison would be like, right? So because their freedoms and have been removed because of the lockdown, they are just about to go nuts. Have you researched the same thing, Rich Scheben?
Well, yeah, I've talked about this for 4 or 5 years, that we're in a deflationary, stagflationary environment. Mm-hmm. And the results of deflation is when you have disincentives working, you have consequently more bankruptcies, defaults, and delinquencies, which has happened. Yes, we have economic cycles, but with the wealth inequality and the debt and credit collapsing, which we've talked about in great detail, we have a deflationary, stagflationary environment. And then that leads to less lending, which creates a decrease in money supply and velocity of money, which is the rate of how money gets transferred from person A to B to C to D. And even when these loans are repaid, which they're not, they don't get recreated, and this deflates bubbles from cheap, especially cheap, non-legitimate, non-productive money sources and businesses. So it's basically, we've been in a period of money shuffling, creative accounting for non-productive, non-earning businesses and government so long, and the whole system is discredited. And we've talked about how robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, and the technocracy is taking the good jobs away. And we've talked about interest rates, why they're falling, why is there a bull market in bonds? It's because interest rates are a function of growth, wages, and inflation. So what we've done over the years, we've exported inflation to low-cost producing countries, and we're getting some inflation back, like food, for example, but it's going to affect the bottom 93%. The bottom 93% is going to get it from all angles. They're like in a fort, and they're running out of food. You got deflation on one end, stagflation on the other, which is basically means no increase in savings or increase in money for your job, and inflation on necessities coming from a different angle. So when everything is popping and everything's artificially propped up, you have a decreased need for credit, which means decreased interest rates, and that's why bonds are still not overvalued. And not to mention the fact that the Fed and everybody under the sun is buying bonds, corporate, municipal bonds, government bonds, stocks. I mean, the whole system is basically, it's set up where it gives free lunch to the elite, okay? We have to deal with capitalism, trying to buy and sell, which is almost impossible because the little guy is running out of money, and they have so much debt, while the elite get propped up with buybacks and stock buybacks and bailouts and too big to fails. And we've talked about this till I'm blue in the face. And this is why the little people have to start doing something about it, because the whole system is so corrupt. You know, the headwinds for future rate of growth under this present system, and I've given so much evidence about how the game is rigged, and right now everything it's so fake and phony that it's all speculation and hedging right now. And as you know, Vince, I've talked in great detail about central bank corrupt monetary policy, Keynesian economics, our present demographic situation, and group identity politics, and how that's absolutely destroyed any chance of capitalism or commerce under this present system, Vince.
What do you think about the money that was doled out by the government to larger corporations? It was supposed to be for the small business people. It was given out to large corporations, and these loans are to be forgiven. So we're going to lend you money. Don't worry about paying it back. That's what our government has done. But they've given it to their friends. It's amazing. Let's talk about that. Rich, are you up to speed on that? Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, would you like to tell us a little bit about some of this money that the government's been giving out to corporations? Some of them are large enough to stand on their own. Everybody wants a bailout, and we've squandered money, and the government is demanding some of it back. They gave it out, but now they go, no, you shouldn't have it. We want it back. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely, and I've talked about this before, where public companies are literally getting supposed monies that's supposed to be allocated for small business. And, you know, just like that what was it, Shake Shack, or I can't remember the name of it, you know, when some of these institutions are getting caught, they're so-called giving it back through phony benevolence and, you know, the phony philanthropy and all this other stuff. But let me talk about, since you brought this subject up, let me mention a few articles here that really shows the headwinds that the little guy has for creating a savings and getting ahead in this country. First article, Jeff Bezos made $24 billion during this pandemic and still has employees without paid sick leave. Next article, Republican Mike Wentz, and this is quite disturbing. It's basically an article with mentions, I'm just going to give in a couple sentences a synopsis, $50 billion from 401k style plans that U.S. troops put their savings into is invested in an index that includes Chinese firms, and I want to talk about Chinese businesses before this show is over today, Vince, some of which build weapon systems for the Chinese military. And some of the comments are in this article is it's insane, and this is the most dangerous adversary we have ever faced, never mind the fact that they are literally buying up American companies left and right. Next article, FBI raids Detroit area medical facility for using intravenous vitamin C to treat COVID-19 patients. And there's a lot of good results with intravenous vitamin C, but the powers that be want people to die. Okay, this is medical tyranny. We have tyranny at every level. Next article, McConnell, Dems shut down small business aid for leverage. So when they go into negotiations to give relief to the people, the Democrats are using small business aid as they're kind of holding them hostage and using it as leverage so they can get some of their big people paid for and a lot of their artsy-fartsy stuff paid for, just like this one article here. AOC and Jerry Nadler want $4 billion in COVID-19 bailout fundings for museums. I mean, come on, folks. You know, here's another article. Millions of Americans are now making far more money being unemployed than they did when they were actually working. Next article. Marxist bartender AOC tells Americans that they should not return to work ever. This is, Vince, how many years have I been talking about the delegitimization of work, especially when you're doing it based on what group you're from? When you lower the demands of bars and standards for a job based on what group, you're delegitimizing work. When you demand no protection, rights, or restitution under the rule of law for the people who are affected negatively, you are delegitimizing work. And guess what else you're doing? You're enabling, if not protecting, the most corrupt companies in the country, in the world, with liability immunity. And this is why I always talk about stop insulting your group, your hyphen, your pronouns, start being American. Because the powers that be do not give a damn about what group you're in. And what they really want to do is sway public opinion. They want to divide us. They want to manufacture perception, pity, and ideology based on what race, gender, religion, ideology, generation, they don't care. But what they're really doing when they lower the bars of standards and expectations is they're insulting your work ethic, ability, and intelligence. You are being degraded and disrespected while you're throwing America into a world of rewarding mediocrity. So there's no opportunity for anybody except for the free lunch given to the elite. That's where we are. Vincent?
Well, we're going to a break in just a few seconds, and let's continue the discussion when we come back. Rich Scheben's with us, and he's in Montana. He lives off-grid, and he's sharing news in a flash with us. We'll be right back. Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, you're talking about groups, and I just want to tell you that I just found out that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree sometimes. I was talking with our son, and he was talking with this girl, and it was a girl that he hadn't really spent a lot of time with. She had a couple of questions for him. She wanted to know how to fix a couple different things, and one of the things that she wanted to know how to fix was her high-pressure washer. So during the corona lockdown here in Missouri, she was working on a high-pressure washer, and she wanted to use it to, I guess, wash the siding of the house and those kinds of things. and it wasn't working properly. So she asked him how to fix it, and he told her. And she replied, "Is there anything that you don't know how to do?" And he said, "Yeah, I don't know how to work well with gays."
Oh, gosh. And I thought we'd actually get through a show without having this discussion, but go
ahead. And you know the boys, I mean, and, you know, he said it with a straight face, you know, and he meant it. And there was no hesitation. And it was, you know, like Art Linkletter, you know, children say the darndest things. So there you go. But you were talking about groups, so, you know, I didn't do it. I wasn't there.
No, I understand. You know, we've talked about this subject to a blue in the face. I'm not sticking up for any particular group. The only way to legitimize any group or any individual is through hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications. I personally don't care what skin pigmentation shade somebody has, what gender they are, what gender they identify as, what religion they are, we have to realize this has been a weaponized tool by the elite to use divide and conquer strategies to destroy America. So this is why I talk about 3 criteria standing for principle to be our base. The same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. The second is truth. And the third is if someone has less consequences for their behavior, then you get to do it too, and that's relating to what group we are. Because what they want to do is make us submissive and break our will. They want to turn everything down. They want to upside down. They want to chaos. They want to have infighting. They want to have division. And this is what is destroying us. And the bottom 93% is we're not getting opportunities and productivity and innovation and anything, because all what's happening while we're fighting against one another based on what group we're in, what's happening is the little guy is having wealth distribution or redistribution taken from the bottom 93% and giving it to the top 1% to 2%. And that's exactly what's going on. Just like a pickpocket. The more distractions, the better success he will have picking people's pockets. And, you know, Vince, if it's okay with you, I want to talk a little bit about Chinese companies and how they're buying up America, if that's all right with you.
And property rights. Let's do those. Let's talk about both of those.
And I'm going to try. You know, folks, I know sometimes I speak. I'm not the most eloquent in speech, and I try and speak as quickly as possible because I feel. And Vince and I, we have this conversation when we speak privately. This next 6 months, this year, will make or break America. This next 6 months will say if we're going to hold on to our freedoms and liberties. This next 6 months will decide if the millions or over 1 million combat soldiers who gave their life for our freedoms and liberty is going to matter, or it'll all be for naught. Okay? So my job is to wake people up. Sometimes it's just like an analogy. Some people need to swim by being thrown in the pool because they don't want to do the reading and research and practice it takes to learn to swim. And it might anger some people, but that's okay. I am not here to be anybody's best friend. I am here to show how we're being distracted, dumbed down, and divided by groups. I'm here to show how the corruption is working. That's why I use financial, economic, social, and political rationale together, so you can see how the fractional reserve lending, the money out of thin air, the stock buybacks, all the welfare for the rich is being taken out of our pockets with opportunities going to the elite. My job is to talk about the unsustainable headwinds for future rates of growth. My job is to talk about how we need to be aware of robotics, automation, artificial intelligence taking our job. My job is to talk about self-sufficiency and ideas and solutions, how you can control at least some of your own destiny. That's just some of the things that I talk about. And I really don't care about what people think. I care about my country. I care about waking people up no matter how I get it done. And that's it. And I just hope this next 6 months is going to be productive from my end. And sometimes when I go through, I prepare probably 10 hours of dialogue for 2 hours of show. I know I'm usually on maybe twice a week with Vince, and I have to delete and omit so much stuff, and I shortcut everything, because my country deserves it. So I want to talk about some of the so-called American companies owned by the Chinese, like Motorola Mobility, Legendary Entertainment Group, which is the studio behind the Jurassic World and more movies. It's just another tool used by the Chinese government, and the Hollywood, which sits back and then takes the dollars while tries to take over the entertainment industry. GE Appliances. While GE is still headed in Kentucky, the company is owned by a Chinese named person. And you know, I realize that GE is like baseball and apple pie, but you know, it's basically the Chinese want to take over the technology, the electronics market. And this is very disturbing. We have to be aware of all this stuff. This is why President Trump wants to bring back manufacturing desperately. We are desperate. We don't even have, look at our medicines. Up to 90% of our medicines, synthetic medicines, are manufactured by what we consider to be our number one enemy threat today. Do you know that I don't think we make penicillin in America? That needs to be looked up. I don't think we do. And how about Smithfield Foods? It's known for its holiday hams and food products that we enjoy here in the U.S., but the company was bought by a Chinese company in 2013 for $7.1 billion. Now, the USDA right now is letting millions of pounds of food rot, while food bank demand has soared. I want you to wrap your head around some of these statistics. Riot games, you know, these League of Legends video games, they own that. You know, we've gotten to the point where we have zero chance of controlling our destiny, especially when our number one enemy is controlling information, like AMC theaters. So basically, when you go to watch a film at some of these theaters, the propaganda, the subliminal messaging has to be status quo, approved by the Chinese. This is very, very dangerous stuff. Now, I want to talk about a few articles right here. China continues to flood the world with defective medical supplies. My eyes aren't what they used to be, folks. Bear with me. Okay, next article. Confirmed China contaminated CDC testing kits. This is an act of war. We mentioned this 3-4 weeks ago. Next article. Gavin Newsom, who's the governor of California, I know this audience knows that, secret billion-dollar deal with Chinese company. Have you noticed a lot of the Democrats, everything all boils down, it's heading towards either China, Jeffrey Epstein, George Soros, Bill Gates. You think this is a coincidence, folks? There aren't any coincidences at this stage. Next article. China warns Australia, drop coronavirus probe or pay the economic price. That's called tyrannical dictatorship, totalitarianism, threats, don't say the truth, we hold the narrative. That's what this says. And then Bill Gates comes out and praises China. Next article, renowned Russian scientist, virus is man-made, created in Wuhan lab with HIV insertions. We've mentioned this, similar articles over the past month many times. This is just another scientist who's not bought and paid for, who has the guts to say the truth. This is very difficult to even read. Giuliani was torching Obama. Why did the United States and the National Institute of Health in 2017 give $3.7 million to the Wuhan land in China when such grants were prohibited in 2014, and President Obama did this in 2017? And, I mean, did he grant an exception? You know, there's so much corruption, folks. Next article, Rockefeller Foundation paper predicted, and predicted is in quotes and very appropriately so, the coronavirus a decade ago. That means all this is planned. The Democrats, forget about this left-right paradigm. The Democrats have sold out to the elite group in the world for control, for world government. And we talked about the agenda on many, many, many shows, from getting rid of cash to mail-in voting. I mean, it's so corrupt, just like Professor wants to lose a COVID-19 race because too many white male researchers. You know, we're getting to the point where we are literally allowing political correctness to run our whole lives. It's out of control. And unfortunately, so many people in today's government and big corporations want a pat on the back for their ideas, but when they hear ideas coming from us, the people, we don't deserve the right to get credit for them. It's just like when Nancy Pelosi got caught on C-SPAN giving a lecture on how she smears and ruins the reputation of her enemies. That's all this is. It's just like General Flynn. He was framed. They framed a frickin' general. I believe he's a 3-star general. The science and technology isn't the problem, folks. It's the fact that the wealthiest people on the top have bought and paid for certain scientists, certain engineers, and certain people to carry the narrative. Well,
yeah, we'll be right back. Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, you mentioned George Soros. Just as a point that you might want to know, class, it's not his real name. His real name is Schwartz. He changed it to Soros. In case you want to know. Rich Scheben?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do, Vince. I'm going through so much stuff here. Let me go through some more news in the flash real quick. This is a very short segment, and then I'll talk about property rights after the break, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Next article, Tom Fitton says, breaking Obama did it. Today's Senate report reconfirms Barack Obama rushed a hit job on Donald Trump regarding Russia. This is very disturbing, folks, and the most disturbing thing is that Trump is surrounded by traitors and cowards. If you or I did 1/1,000,000th of the things that we've discussed on this show and many alternative media sites, we would be in the who's gal in one day. One day. Next article, ACLU sues Idaho for banning male athletes in female sports. You can't make this stuff up, folks. These are all published articles in the public domain, I promise you. CNN ran 700 articles on the Kavanaugh smear and barely said anything when it comes to Biden's sex charges. Cuomo orders postage paid absentee ballot applications for every New Yorker. Excuse me, New Yorkers, why are you still living there, or Californians? Because Pelosi says she wants to demand mail-in voting so she can rig the vote. Next article, Biden expert Emmanuel, experts in quotes, overestimated coronavirus cases by 99 million. Overestimated corona cases by 99 million. million. See, it doesn't matter if you're an expert, if you're a scientist, if you're a physician, if you're bought and paid for. It's irrelevant. And if you say something, here we go. YouTube CEO declares anything that goes against the World Health Organization will be removed from the platform. Again, YouTube censors viral video of California doctors criticizing stay-at-home order. Even though they're doctors, even though they're experts, it doesn't matter because they're not carrying the narrative. Folks, the people at the highest levels only care about feathering their own nest, manufacturing the perception of their own self-importance and self-preservation. If anything gets done for the well-being of the people, for freedom and liberty, it's going to have to be done by us. Next article. What else has the FBI buried? Stunning newly disclosed documents exonerate General Michael Flynn. Next article. BBC caught editing Trump's speech on disinfectants. That's what they do. They take what we say out of context, and then they demonize, delegitimize, and discredit us. Regarding the FBI, is it the FBI or the KGB? Is there anybody who have guts in the FBI to come forward and talk about all these scandals? Anybody? You know what? They use the word diversity, fairness, and equality all the time. Maybe we should have people representing the bottom 93%, especially with all these defaults, delinquencies, and bankruptcies going on. I mean, we inflate the dollars for high government pensions where people are getting $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a year, and we're buying bonds and hurting the little guy and taxing and inflating the dollars so the bottom 93%, never mind gets ahead, goes behind. Ex-Intel officer Brennan ignored evidence that Russia favored Hillary to win in 2016. This really isn't new. Hillary Clinton sold 20% of U.S.'s uranium to Russia. I mean, I'm an average Joe here. Are we living in a Twilight Zone episode? What the hell? In Washington State, they're one vote away from freeing a serial killer over the COVID-19 because they want chaos. They want infighting. Next article. Massachusetts police chief arrested for trying to have sex with a 14-year-old boy. A police chief in Massachusetts. Can't make this stuff up. Booker pleads for state and municipal bailouts. Why should the taxpayers pay for malinvestment? When you promise all these government workers all these big benefits, big paychecks, and big pensions that you know you can't afford so you can get their vote, why should the people pay for this crap? Next article. Politico quietly corrects report about Trump owning millions to bank in China after denial by Bank of China. You cannot believe, folks, you cannot believe one word, one syllable that comes from the mainstream media. They're all bought and paid for. And here's an example. Larry King, when he talked about the Biden rape episode, all of a sudden it disappears from Google. Imagine my shock. Next article. Minneapolis is lost. They now have a Muslim call to prayer blasted over 5 loudspeakers 5 times a day in Minneapolis. Congratulations, Minneapolis. We'll be right back after the break, folks.
Rich Scheben's with us. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. StudyFinds.org says that a research was commissioned by Kelton Global, and they found that of the 1,895 U.S. citizens over the age of 18 who were surveyed this month, 72% said they expected to reach a breaking point by mid-June if stay-at-home orders aren't lifted. It says that 100% of the respondents said they would snap if this lasts longer than 6 months. So they would lose it if the stay-at-home orders last longer than 6 months. So this survey was conducted between April 3rd and April 6th, and at that time, 16% of those surveyed said they had already hit the breaking point, and that the number was rising to 25% within the next 2 weeks. So we're talking about 1 out of 4 Americans have reached their wits' end already. So, let's see. Further, the study says that 69% of Americans feel extremely worried about flying on an airplane. I agree with that. Taking a cruise, 76%. Going to a restaurant, 62%. Or using ride-sharing service, 58%. And about half, 53%, feel the same way about going to the hospital should they suffer an emergency during the corona panic or pandemic. Of those afraid of going on a cruise, 43% anticipate this fear will last forever. And some people, 21%, said that they feel the same about going to a restaurant, dining out, meaning that they will always feel very concerned, extremely worried, that was their words, about going to a restaurant. I'm not going to a restaurant. Why would I do that? You know, why would I? And it's more than the corona panic. It's more than the coronavirus with me in restaurants. I've had tenants whom I've seen how they behave, and I've seen their actions, and I've seen how messy and how sloppy and how careless and reckless they are. And I know where they work. They worked in restaurants. I had a tenant I was working on replacing a hot water heater, and this was back in the 80s. She worked at a restaurant, and she was making fried chicken. And I put the kitchen cabinets in the house. New sink, new stainless steel sink, single bowl. She had dishes in there. She just slid the dishes over to the right side, poured some flour on the left side, and rolled the chicken in the flour, in the sink, with the dirty dishes. And then into the frying pan in the hot oil they went. The pieces of chicken. So, would I want to eat at a restaurant where someone uses those cooking protocols? Absolutely not. So I can understand why some people, maybe they've seen the same kinds of things that I have. Maybe that's why they added that kind of experience to what they're reading and learning about in the news, to the reasons why they don't want to go out and have people prepare their food. It seems that younger Americans seem to be especially susceptible to breaking down. 59% of Generation Z expected to reach their breaking point after 4 weeks. 80% they said they can only handle another 2 months of lockdown. And 35% of young adults 18 to 24 admit that they are at their wits' end. That's 35% of 18 to 24-year-olds admit that they're at wits' end, compared to 22% of those over 45. So the younger they are, the more unable they are to cope with being locked in. It makes sense to me. And if you think about it, how would you like to have some of them at your house? And what's happening is there's more infighting in the family. There's more family strife. There's more yelling and screaming. With those who are married to each other. Rich, you have any comments about that?
Well, we could talk about this for 2 shows. I mean, look at the stress the taxpayers are under. We have to pay through damaging cost-shifting penalties for illegal immigrants, while the Democrats are literally fighting to pay illegal immigrants with taxpayer monies for the virus stimulation package or whatever they call it. We're already paying for education, health care, and car insurance through incredible premiums for cost-shifting penalties for illegal immigrants, and now they want us to pay for illegal immigrant.
Rich, let's talk about the definition of cost-shifting. What you're saying, I believe, is that cost-shifting is a really nice, polite way of saying we are being forced to pay what others are not paying. It's
taxpayers for everything through increased taxes or increased inflation. Mm-hmm. Cost shifting, you can almost make that synonymous it's a cousin of cost shifting. So, for example, when someone comes here illegally and they are legally allowed to drive a car, but they don't legally have to have insurance, guess who pays for it? We pay for it through our insurance. Even if we've never had an accident, our premiums are higher. Same thing with education. Same thing with health care. When someone goes into an ER, I can't afford to go into an ER. So when you have legal immigrants going to an ER and they don't have to pay, guess who has to pay the premium higher price when they go? Americans.
That'd be us.
Get how that works?
Yeah. Kyle in Montana, welcome. You're on with Rich Scheben.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen.
Hey, Kyle.
I agree with you completely, Rich. This is, and I think there's a couple of things that people for short term, meaning in the next few months, better consider dramatically. And I think personally in the next 60 days, when you see this supply chain, the breaking down of the supply chain, I think it's going to take about 60 days to actually hit enough so that people go from concern to panic, at least up, or I don't know about you, Rich, but where you're at up there, but around here, there's no panic anymore. I mean, people are walking around shopping just like it was downtown Phoenix 6 months ago. No big deal, no nothing. There's a few spots in some of the grocery stores that some of the vegetables are there's bare spots, but not very often, and usually you can get it in another place. You know what I mean? It's not like anything hits, but I think if you see in the next 60 days, if this supply chain doesn't get repaired immediately, which I don't think they're going to allow to happen. I don't think it can come back up in 60 days. You're going to see a panic that won't quit, folks. So, the things you and Vince and I and Joey and Miles and all of these guys over the years have talked about and begged and pleaded with people, I believe we're too late for anybody else to be. I mean, they can run out and panic buy, but that's only going to last maybe, if you're lucky and you have some money, it might last you for 2 to 4 months at the most. But this winter, in my opinion, this winter is going to be really, really bad.
Kyle, I never think it's too late to do anything, and we've talked about this on the air before. For a few $100s, you can literally buy dehydrated beans, rice, and pasta for so little money. At least you could. And I'm sure you can still get it if you look hard. And that could last for, it's so inexpensive, you can get a year's worth of food for a very little price. So there's always ways to do things. And just like when I talked last time about raised bed garden, get some boundaries, get some borders. I use logs. I literally use logs from my trees on my property, and then I put dirt in it, and I even make my own soil with my compost. So there's ways to do things where you can go to a nursery, buy some soil, and literally start planting right now in a raised bed fashion.
I agree that that if people, I guess my point was this: if people have not moved mentally to be able to do this kind of stuff now, then I believe they're mentally sitting here hoping that everything's going to be okay and that they are going to be able to pull out of this. The government's going to pull them out, and they're going to get so blindsided, it's going to blow their mind.
Were you listening, Kyle, when I was talking about China buying our food?
Oh, yeah.
All American companies and Food Bank, American Food Bank they're in such demand farmers and ranchers are literally throwing food away. Now, those three headlines make no sense. Okay, we have the resources.
Rich,
the problem is the people at the top are not. They're so busy about manufacturing their perception of success and not offending people and being politically correct. Our government is non-functional. Okay, the whole system is non-functional at this point in time.
You're talking about throwing food away. Smithfield closed its fifth F-I-F-T-H plant because of the coronavirus outbreak. And farmers are telling us, all of us, that they are going to have to, or they may have to euthanize tens of thousands of pigs. And what that means is farmers are going to shoot their pigs. They're going to use blunt force trauma, hit them over the head, or electrocution to kill their pigs because they've raised the pigs in a timeline, whereas when the pigs are old enough, they go to the processor where they are then killed and turned into food, meat, bacon, etc. Well, the plants are infected. Smithfield's processing plants are infected with the coronavirus, and they've shut down in Illinois, South Dakota, Missouri, and other locations. They cannot process the pigs. So now the farmers don't know what to do with them. So the farmers may just have to kill them. It's an outrage. So we've mentioned here at USA Prepares that chickens have been needlessly slaughtered because they couldn't be processed. We're now talking about pigs. I mentioned months ago that it'd probably be beef as well. And here we are. And the Smithfield plant one Smithfield plant takes in about 10,000 pigs a day. And they shut down. So where do those 10,000 pigs go? And according to the information that I've read, if you combine all the slaughterhouses for pigs, we're talking about 100,000 pigs a day. And if they all get shut down, where do those pigs go? That's the problem. And it's pigs, it's chickens, and it's cattle. And once this shutdown gets beyond where it is now, I believe the number, they say maybe 15% have been shut down. I believe the number is more like 25%. I can't prove it. But I believe that's it. Because every time you read the news, you find out, well, we were off. We underestimated. So my number is about 25% shut down so far. It's very hard to restart these plants. It's very hard. So the farmers are going to go under, many of them. Not all of them, but many, the little guys. And how do you feed pigs without income? Most farmers are paycheck to paycheck as well. Actually, they borrow a lot of money, and they have to pay it back when they sell. So how are they going to pay back these loans? And it looks like the banks are going to come after these farms. What a mess.
Well, Vince, don't forget Smithfield Foods, just like I mentioned earlier in the show, is purchased by a Chinese company for $7.1 billion. Do you really think that the closure of Smithfield plants is an accident? It's not looking like it to me. It's looking like this is an act of war.
Well, that's just Smithfield, but the downstream effects are to the local farmer. And we're going to find out in a few days what's happening really to the price of beef. And I have to tell you, there are very few buyers around here for beef. Now, we know this for certain. So the supermarkets are required to have government-inspected meat. But when the plants close down, the government's not inspecting the meat. So there'll be shortages of chicken products, eggs, and pork products. as a result of this. And I would think that it would hit the supermarket shelves within just a couple weeks, as Kyle's been saying. I really believe this. Now, what would be really nice is if President Trump, I hope you're listening, would allow companies like ours, USA Prepares, to slaughter cattle with the buyer assisting us and processing their own meat, meaning our farm could sell half a cow to two families. Those two families show up, and the three of us, my family and the two other families, butcher the cow, and the two families who bought the cow take it home, all wrapped up, ready for the freezer. That's what we need to do, President Trump. Otherwise, it's going to really smell. There's going to be dead cows, dead pigs, dead chickens everywhere. And you won't get any. And neither will your family.
Keep in mind, Vince, this is planned. George Soros said at the Davos meeting that Trump will not be reelected because the bubbles will pop. Remember Bill Maher and many big Democrat voices saying, let's crash the economy? This is done on purpose. There's no way that Russia, Ukraine, Mueller, impeach, all these things that have happened. Basically, we've had a coup by people from inside our government against a sitting president. All this we're talking about is planned. Very eye-opening.
I remember having a guy come to our house and he brought one of his friends with him. This friend was an ardent Democrat. He voted for Barry and his ilk. And he just smiled and grinned at my kitchen table, and I thought, that guy's never coming here again. I won't let people who want to steal from us in our home. We'll be right back. Well, there's a study in New York City by Siena College, and they say that nearly half of all New Yorkers claim that they know someone who died from the coronavirus. Nearly half. So the way it works out is in New York, the black community has been infected the most, 52% of blacks and, 52% of Latinos and 48% of blacks confirming that they know someone who has died of the coronavirus, compared with 25% of the white voters who have been surveyed say that they personally know a victim. But a total of 51% of the state residents surveyed said they know someone who's been infected with COVID-19. And that's a rise of 20% as compared with the same time last month. Now, I don't know anybody personally, but I do know one of our instructors has 3 students at the college level who have positively tested so far. So for sure we know that, or she knows that. But nearly half of all New Yorkers claim that they know someone who has died from COVID-19. Kyle, any comments about that?
Yeah, I've got a couple, Vince. We've talked about this before, the book, Who Moved the Cheese? Yeah. I think the ability to survive, folks, is the ability to perceive what is going to happen to the best of your ability and then start preparing to live in that new reality. If I were these pig farmers who are dependent upon Smithfield and these other places, I would be investing as much money as I possibly could get my hands on to develop some kind of, even if it's slow, it's going to be a lot slower than what the Smithfields and all those guys are, some kind of a local pork and or chicken and or cow system to butcher, wrap, and process this meat yourself, because there's more money in it for you. It might be a little slower You won't be able to. You might have to increase your cost for a short time, but the money coming into you would be the same, even though you're selling less animals. Anyway, I think people, it's hard for people to do that because they really do not want to step outside of normalcy. Normalcy bias is, in my opinion, in this particular scenario, is going to be the biggest killer of most people. I mean, I agree with Rich that there's not too much, there's plenty of time left, but we might reach, 20,000 people, something like that, Vince? I don't know how many people are listening. You know, I don't think you have no way to know that I know of how many people were listening to it. But the vast majority of the GDP are going to be the ones that are going to die. And I think this winter, like we talked off air before, I think there's going to be people starving. And it's like I told you, my great-grandpa told my grandpa one time, and my grandpa passed it to me. And he said, if you just got a horse that is untamable, you starve it. And then when you start feeding it again, it'll do anything you want. And I think that's exactly how we're being managed.
Very well said.
Yeah, and we're not getting true information. Here's on Zero Hedge right now, Adam Schiff blocks release of declassified Russia probe transcripts. Basically, they want to control what the people see in a desperate bid to keep discredited Russian narrative alive. And another article right here, 2 articles above, Politico quietly admits, and I mentioned this earlier, that the Trump owes millions article was fake news with a midnight correction. Folks, anything from the mainstream media is bought and paid for. It's a controlled narrative to sway public opinion. You have to do your own reading and research. You have to be self-sufficient. You have to think outside the box because our public government schools have not been giving skill sets to our youth. We're teaching them how to push buttons and be politically correct. We don't have the balance between nature and technology. It's like all technology for the purpose of censorship and surveillance to control the people, not to give the people an opportunity to control their destiny. Guys?
Okay, so I'm reading Zero Hedge, and it says the Confidence Board report showed that just 34% of consumers, that 70% chunk of gross domestic product, believes that business conditions are normal. How is that possible that anyone could think that business conditions are normal? How can 34% believe business conditions are normal? How's that possible?
I just answered your question in the statement previous. Yeah. We're teaching our people through public government schools. They could never give a lecture on economics. They're basically socially and politically indoctrinated to certain talking points, and they have no skill sets. That's why they answer a question like that. They have no economic or financial background. Mm-hmm. They haven't been taught.
And
when you reward mediocrity for this many years, for this many decades, that's what you get. People who are protecting their group hyphen and pronoun. That's what you get.
So in this corona panic of, let's say, 3 months, 1 in 3 Americans have either been laid off, lost their job, or had their hours or income cut due to the corona panic. 1 in 3. And yet 34% think that business is normal. That's unbelievable.
Vince, yeah, I agree with you. It is unbelievable. All right, so here's a who moved the cheese question for you and me and Rich and anybody else out there that is starting to prepare. Joey, I know you're probably listening. What kind of a reality are we going to have to deal with? guys, what kind of a reality are we going to have to deal with when those 34 or 75 or 95, more likely, percent of the GDP, and I mean generally dumb public, gets hungry? That's a who moved the cheese for us that we better consider right now, or else we're going to be behind the 8 ball.
Okay, so just to make that question very, very clear. So, class, let's say you have a small farm, and let's say you have 6 chickens, and those 6 chickens lay on average maybe 5 eggs a day, and you're feeding your family with those chicken eggs, and you find somebody in your backyard, the chickens are squawking, they're making a lot of noise as if they're in distress, and you find somebody trying to steal one of your chickens, what would you do? Would you say, what are you doing? Would you say, stop? Would you point your rifle at them? Would you do nothing? Or would you say, you know what, he's probably hungry, let him have the chicken, we'll just stay inside? What would you do?
Well, that's one of the reasons we're on the air, Vince. We talk about gardening, we talk about nutrition, we talk about raising animals, butchering, gutting animals, being self-sufficient. And, when it comes to a point, it all depends. The answer is it depends. And there's not enough time left in the show to really talk about this. It depends on your personal situation. It depends on a lot of things. But I believe that's why we're doing this show, is it's easier to teach a man to fish. And you know the rest of the statement. And this is why we do what we do.
So a couple of years
in rural America, most people are going to be prepared.
A couple of years ago, I told a story about our neighbor, and he was putting in a fence across or along the road opposite our house, our farm. And what he was doing is he was pounding in these green fence posts, one at a time, about every 10 feet. And you pound them in with a fence pounder. And it's about, 20-pound piece of pipe capped on one end with 2 handles on it. You raise it over the top of the fence post, and you slam it down against the top of the fence post, and it drives the fence post into the ground. Bang, bang, bang. And ultimately, that fence post is driven into the right depth, and you go and drive the next one in. Well, this guy drove in about 1/8 of a mile of them, every 10 feet. He put a string along the ground so he could have a straight line, and he lined up these fence posts. And he was going to come back the next weekend and put the barbed wire, 5 strands of barbed wire, attached that to each one of these fence posts. And between the time he drove them in and the time he came back to put the barbed wire on them, someone stole all of his fence posts.
Wow.
Well, they're $5 a piece. Okay, so now, are they easily removed? Well, if it's been raining, yeah. If not, you need to pull them out with a fence post puller. It's kind of like an old-fashioned jack, and you put it on the ground. It's a little bit taller than the fence post, or about the same size, and it has a lever on it, and you hook a little chain to it, and you push down on this lever, and it pulls them out of the ground. Well, if you have one of those, which, yeah, and they cost maybe $30 for one of those, so an investment of $30 can yield, 6 fence posts. You have a break-even point with just stealing 6 fence posts. Well, this guy lost 1/8 of a mile of them. Now, the question is, what would you do if someone stole your fence? Now, we don't think about things like, really stealing a fence? Well, it happened. It happened right across the road from us. So what would you do if you saw someone stealing your fence? Would you say, well, I guess you need it more than we do? Or would you say, I think you're going to put it back? Or would you mind putting it back? Or would you point your rifle at their chest?
Well, yeah, if you have animals in there, Vince, and you're at risk of losing them, whether they be food or pets or your vocation, and that's when things probably get violent.
Well, cattle rustling used to be punishable by death. And I have a feeling, Rich and Kyle in class, that soon it will be punishable by death again. But it won't be publicized. I think these bodies will just disappear. And eventually the cattle rustling will stop. Rich is with us. Kyle's with us. And class, several years ago, our fence was cut. And 6 of our cows ended up on another guy's farm. And we were faced with, what do we do? In that particular case, I called the sheriff, and I didn't want there to be a shootout at that time. So I called the sheriff. The sheriff said, how would I prove that they were our cows? And I told him by the color of the tags. And I said, if I call them, they'll come over. They'll come running because they recognized me and my voice. And so we got in the sheriff's vehicle. We drove a couple miles to where this guy had hidden our cows. I called them. They came running. The sheriff said, I guess they're yours. I said, yep. And so what none of these programs have really dealt with, I'm talking about Survivors, 1975, 76, the 2000 series, Jericho, and The Walking Dead. What none of those really dealt with effectively, in my opinion, is what do you do when someone steals from you, like food, like animals, you know, your cows, your chickens, your pigs. What do you do? Do you go to war? Do you kill them? Do you say, you know what, I know you're hungry, so we'll let you have one, and then hope that they don't come back and steal the rest? It's a very difficult situation. Now, in the Wild West, it was really simple. Cattle rustlers were executed. It was really simple. And eventually, that stopped it. Kyle, any comments?
Yeah, you bet. You know, you think about it, horse thieves were hung as well, because people then knew that if you did not have, your horse was the way that you used to take care of the cows, to be able to have a livelihood that where you could eat. And they knew these things, their lives depended on it. So therefore, those animals carried such a high value that anybody that would destroy that value was deemed worthless and available.
Right. They would say he's nothing but a horse thief. Right.
Yep. Exactly true. Yep. So I think, folks, we're fixing to get a real dose of reality. And I think by next spring, if things hold anywhere near together enough that we can still talk to each other, we can still listen to the radio, all of this things don't devolve into the Walking Dead kind of a scenario if they don't, which I don't expect that they will, because I do believe, I do believe that the elite and these people, they want a bunch of subservient, willing sheep, and I think they're going to give them bread and games as long as they can. I expect another government bailout, personally, Vince. I think it'll probably be another $1,200, but I just expect that they will probably do that to placate the public for a while. Anyway,
right.
That's kind of all I had. But
it's just to postpone the rioting in the streets by the GDP. Rich Scheben, your thoughts?
Well, you know what? We should just do a show, which I was planning on doing, on property rights. And you know how our shows go. There's a million and one things to talk about, and we deviate and go into tangents, and that's just what happens. I mean, that's just the way it is. But we need to have a show just on property rights, and you know, I think we're all for property rights, but we also have to have an asterisk there. how we can protect the little guy. For example, I know we have seconds left, but here in Montana, they've brought in non-indigenous wolves. We used to have an elk migration out of Yellowstone Park of over 20,000 elk, and now basically they're on some of the big ranches because the wolves have killed so many. There might be 1,000 or 2,000 elk left, so they don't give out the tags anymore. Where thousands of families depended on the meat. So we have excess situations. We have a war on males and masculinity, and what we have in Montana is that we're number one. Now, granted, it's per capita, and I've said this before. We're number one in the country for meth and suicides. I don't understand this. So the same families who are basically saying they're anti-hunting, I know personally some of them, and I'm for hunting on private ground, okay? But a lot of these guys are getting top dollars for hunts, and they're basically, back in the day when I got here in the end of '86, every rancher I knew would when I came here with a heavy New York accent, would allow me to hunt on their land. Now the poor people have to, you got to stick up for the little guy a little bit. They
Rich,
can't
I've got a quick
access
question
hunt,
for you.
maybe a few cow hunts. But
Rich, what would you do if you saw a pack of coyotes killing if you had cows, killing your cows? What would you do?
Oh, the same thing everybody would do. They would shoot or trap the coyotes. Absolutely.
Okay, Kyle, what would you do?
Absolutely same thing.
Yeah. We used to have a pack of coyotes around here. All right, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rich and Kyle.
You bet.
Class will be back tomorrow.